Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really get into subjects that matter, moving past the surface level.
And today we're tackling something that feels incredibly relevant, noise, but interestingly, through the lens of a 19th century thinker.
Exactly. Arthur Schopenhauer. You know that feeling when you just crave some quiet? We're diving into why that feeling might be deeper than simple irritation, using insights from the article The Tyranny of Noise, Schopenhauer's warning for the modern soul.
Yeah, our goal here is to unpack what Schopenhauer was saying about noise back then and crucially see how it connects to our lives now. Not just the sounds, but, our thinking, our well-being, maybe even our spirituality.
It's quite something, isn't it? Thinking that someone living, 1788 to 1860, way before smartphones and constant traffic already saw noise as a serious problem. Not just annoying, but like an actual assault on the human spirit.
He really did. And he wasn't subtle about it. In his essay on noise, there's that famous quote.
Yeah.
The amount of noise which anyone can bear undisturbed stands in inverse proportion to his mental capacity.
Wow. He basically says noise tolerance is a measure of intellect.
Well, yes, and may therefore be regarded as a pretty fair measure of it. Noise is a torture to all intellectual people. But it's important to see this wasn't just him being grumpy.
No, it wasn't just personal pet peeves.
No, it tied into his whole philosophy. It was a fundamental insight for him.
Okay, so let's unpack that inverse proportion idea. It's not about saying people bothered by noise are weak or something.
Not at all. It links back to his core concept of the will. This blind, irrational, striving force he believed underlies everything.
The will.
Yeah.
Like a fundamental drive.
Exactly. And for Schopenhauer, noise was this jarring, unwelcome manifestation of that chaotic will. It just fragments your thoughts, pulls you away from contemplation, forces you into reaction mode.
So noise is like the will crashing into our minds, basically.
Yeah.
And he valued the intellect so highly. Saw it as a great achievement, the article mentioned.
Precisely. He saw our intellect, our ability to think rationally and abstractly, as this incredibly precious, almost fragile sanctuary, a brief respite from the constant push of the will.
A safe space for thought.
Yes, and noise just shatters that. It doesn't just distract you for a second. It breaks the whole continuous flow of thought needed for any real insight. You lose the thread completely.
Ah, okay. That makes his point about higher mental capacity clearer. If your mind is engaged in that deeper, continuous thought, noise is more disruptive. It's not weakness, it's heightened sensitivity because of that deeper engagement.
You've got it. It's a sign of that refined perception, that ability for sustained thought. The article even notes he was personally tormented by everyday sounds, like knocking or hammering.
Things we might just tune out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for him, they were a direct barrier to his way of thinking.
Now, the article takes this even further, framing noise as violence against the soul. That sounds quite intense. How does that connection work?
Well, if you think about spiritual growth, developing consciousness, self-awareness, so much of that relies on inner stillness, right?
Like meditation, finding that quiet center?
Precisely. Think of Buddhist practices or Zen concepts like mu emptiness. They all emphasize quietude as essential ground. Noise actively works against that. It prevents the very conditions needed for that kind of inner work.
So the constant sound keeps us reactive, scattered. The article mentions changes in breathing, nervous system agitation.
Exactly. It forces us into this agitated, outward-facing mode. Physiologically, even. It's the polar opposite of that centered, mindful state spiritual practices aim for.
It's interesting, too, what kinds of noise bothered him most. Not just loudness, but unnecessary, inconsiderate sounds.
Yes. Things like whips cracking, apparently common then, or dogs barking endlessly, door slamming. He saw these as almost moral failings.
It's acoustic selfishness, I think the article called it.
That's a perfect term. It showed for him a disregard for others, a failure to respect the shared need for peace.
So if that was his reaction to 19th century noise, gosh, what would he make of today? The article calls it a modern auditory hellscape.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Constant traffic, jets, phones pinging constantly, delivery trucks, leaf blowers.
Construction noise, air conditioners humming, people yelling into phones in public.
Music bleeding through walls. The list is endless. And the point is, each one of those sounds, according to this view, nibbles away at the conditions needed for deep thought. It has a cumulative spiritual impact.
There's that quote from Gordon Hempton, the acoustic ecologist. Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. That really hits home here. We lose that presence.
We do. And Max Picard warned, when silence is no longer taken into account, something breaks in the human being. like losing our foundation.
Which is worrying, because it feels like we're adapting to the noise, almost embracing it sometimes. Constant background music, always having earbuds in.
And Schopenhauer would likely see that adaptation not as resilience, but as a kind of diminishment, a surrender of our higher faculties, a dulling of our sensitivity.
So the danger isn't just the noise itself, but becoming numb to the value of silence. Losing the ability to appreciate quiet beauty, or have truly deep conversations, or just hear ourselves think.
That's the profound risk, yes. Thomas Merton talked about activism and overwork as a kind of violence. Noise fits into that, doesn't it? It's both a symptom and a cause of a culture valuing constant doing over just being.
And it affects us socially, too. This idea of acoustic trespassing really resonated with me.
Absolutely. Loud phone calls in quiet spaces, blasting music without headphones. It's more than annoying. It shows a breakdown in recognizing shared space, shared needs, like you said, acoustic selfishness.
And that has real consequences, right?
Yeah.
The article mentioned everything from neighborhood fights to actual health impact.
Definitely. Reduced school performance near airports, links to cardiovascular issues, and often it's poorer communities hit hardest by noise pollution. It's an inequality issue, too.
So Schopenhauer's solution was basically escape, isolation.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, isn't practical for most of us today.
Right, so what can we do? The article offered some ideas, creating acoustic sanctuaries.
Yes, finding or making quiet spaces, even small ones, in our homes or publicly, and developing acoustic mindfulness, just being aware of the noise we make.
That's a big one. How often do we contribute without thinking?
Exactly. And then there's deep listening, not just hearing, but mindfully paying attention to sounds, like John Cage exploring the sounds within silence in that anechoic chamber.
Finding the nuances even in sound itself. And advocating for change, like noise ordinances, better city planning.
That's crucial on a larger scale, recognizing a right to relative quiet as part of public well-being. You know, even Schopenhauer, often seen as pessimistic, found escape in aesthetics, especially music, a way to temporarily transcend the will.
So maybe seeking quiet is its own kind of discipline, creating space for, well, for transcendence in a way.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it, because ultimately, wisdom, intuition, our conscience, the article argues they need silence to be heard clearly.
That inner voice gets drowned out otherwise.
It does. So his warning, though centuries old, feels incredibly vital today. Are we losing our capacity for depth because we're losing silence?
He put it so powerfully. The most valuable insight is the outcome of standstill moments, a condition which can only evolve in quietude. And to bring it right back to the listener, the article includes that quick self-test. Are you hypersensitive to noise?
Yeah, it's a neat little reflection tool. It asks things like, the barking of dogs annoys me a lot, or the noise of cars at speed is irritating.
Why do people have to speak so loudly? That's one I hear a lot.
Right. And at night, I wake up at the slightest noise. Military aircraft make an unbearable din, and I can't stand the television and music at high volume.
And based on how many you agree with, you get a profile: insensitive, little sensitive, very, or hypersensitive.
It just gives you a chance to pause and think about your own relationship with the sounds around you.
It's a good starting point for reflection. The source also lists tags like awareness, inner voice, mental health, spiritual centering for more thought, and points to other related posts.
Yeah, things like Reflections of the Soul, Politics Examined from a Spiritual Perspective, and one on Sikhism offers wider context.
So Schopenhauer's Lament, as the article calls it, really lands with force today. It makes you stop and think about the noise in your own life and where the silence is or isn't.
Definitely. And perhaps the final thought to leave everyone with is this. In a world that seems to equate noise with energy, progress, maybe even importance, what are we truly losing as silence diminishes? What's the real cost to our inner lives and maybe even to our collective wisdom? Something worth finding a quiet moment to ponder.